Warning: this episode contains some strong language. Listener discretion is advised. Also, because somehow we completed a whole episode's recording without actually saying it, Fault Tolerance, Val's book that is being talked about on this very episode, released this past Tuesday. If you are listening to this episode just as it was released, that was August 2nd, 2022. Finally, this episode is about the third book in a trilogy, and as such, the reading and some discussion beforehand does contain spoilers. That material begins at about the 8-minute mark and lasts for 13 minutes and 30 seconds. So if you would not like to be spoiled, just skip ahead. Hello, and welcome to Tales from the Trunk, reading the stories that did make it. I'm Hilary B. Disniaks. Listeners, I'm super excited to welcome back one of my first season guests to round out her trilogy, Valerie Valdes. Welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am super excited to be here.
I'm super excited to have you back. I'm super excited to get Fault Tolerance in my grubby little mitts in not too long from now.
I know it's less than a month. I'm freaking out. Totally freaking out.
It's absolutely warranted and also, so exciting.
Yay!
We, for listeners who might not have listened to all of the back episodes, Val came on in, I believe, July of 2019, a few short months before Chilling Effect came out, and here we are now with Fault Tolerance, the close of the trilogy.
Yeah, it's incredible because when I first started, obviously I had plans for multiple books, but I definitely was not sure if any of those plans would come to fruition. I didn't know what was going to happen with all of the vast universe of people that I had invented for the first book. And to have it be able to fully finish out what I feel like is the initial arc that I intended is really awesome. And
it's really awesome. It's really special, and it's also really satisfying to have a trilogy of books where we get Bofa jokes just all over the place.
Oh, it's so fun because with the first book, I had no expectations. I decided that I was going to write something utterly self-indulgent, something that my friends and I could just laugh about back and forth as I was drafting it. And that is what happened. We just sat there making jokes at each other the entire time, and it was wonderful. And
Yeah.
and then expanding that out from the original short story into something much longer was an amazing experience. And just again, taking it out into the full 3 books was great, but ultimately it did start as, I had a lot of feelings about social stuff, things that were going on in the zeitgeist at the time, things that I wanted to put into writing in a satirical way.
And feelings about Garrus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I just finished the Mass Effect Legendary Edition replay of the whole trilogy that I started, I want to say in 2020. And just, like 2 to 4 hours a week, basically, tiny increments. I've been working my way through the trilogy again. And so having big Garrus feels right right before we record this, because I literally beat the game on Tuesday. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I realized that definitely a lot of Chilling Effect in the trilogy is me processing my feelings about that game, about a lot of the things that, things that the game did right and things that the game did wrong. and things. It's not that this is a fix-it fic, but it has some of the hallmarks of a fix-it fic. And did you see that I'm
Mm-hmm.
wearing my Garrus shirt today? Because I don't know if you saw that I'm wearing my Garrus shirt
Hell yeah.
today.
Yeah, I have personally sold at least 5 people on Chilling Effect by saying, "Do you like Garrus?"
And it's funny because I feel like Vakar, in some ways, it definitely Garrus is part of it, but I think he also has a bit of Thane in him,
Mm-hmm.
and he is sort of just his own character too. I mean, obviously he's not intended to be a replication of any particular character. And one of the things in doing the replay of it that struck me as utterly different between Garrus and Vakar is Garrus is such a cop. He
Mm-hmm.
really is. And so much of the trilogy is about him. I'm not going to say necessarily becoming less of a cop because a lot of times he still kind of falls back on some of that mentality, but definitely my books were he is not.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah,
someone
no,
who's running
Vakar's the
away.
goodest boy.
Yeah, he's trying to not be a cop, and then he kind
Mm-hmm.
of gets dragged into sort of being a cop, and he hates it. and
Yeah.
and so that is in a lot of ways very different from Garrus's experience. Certainly, he has his own backstory about why he's a cop and what he wants to do as a cop, and some of it is very ugly. Unfortunately, I'm a Paragon Shepherd
Mm-hmm.
player, and so my power fantasy is helping people, but.
Yeah.
As I play through, what that means for Garrus as a character is that you have to spend a lot of time trying to uh, reroute his desires to do things like cut red tape, beat
Mm-hmm.
up on criminals. It's like, buddy, this is all of the bad stuff of being a cop. Let's not. How about we
Mm-hmm.
don't instead? So yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so with that massive effect, there's something there. I'm not going to find it. With that, with all that being said, is there anything we need to know about fault tolerance before we get into it?
So, Fault Tolerance, as we have discussed, is the third book in the trilogy, and in the same way that the third Mass Effect video game pulls together a lot of the threads that were put out there, it sort of takes some of the Chekhov's guns off of the mantle that were
Mm-hmm.
put up there in other parts of the game trilogy. My book sort of does the same thing. I've been setting up certain background characters and situations, and I guess we are going to have some spoilers. I don't know how spoilerific we want to get, and so warning in advance that there may be spoilers, I suppose. But in the first book, at the very end, basically, it was revealed that the thing that the fridge was trying to get at the entire time was a transforming robot.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the second book, once again, at the end, we have sudden showing up of transforming robot. And so book three had to, of course, then be Welcome to the Transforming Robots, because
Mm-hmm.
that was where the entire thing was leading up to, and that's where I wanted it to go the entire time, planting that seed
Chekhov's
in
cool robot.
Chekhov's robots. And so with the first book, I was playing around with a lot of video games that I love, putting them in different contexts, mashing them up with other things. You've got
Mm-hmm.
the Mario Kart Fury Road chapter, you've got the Portal stuff at the end. There's a lot that I was playing with in the first book, definitely. And
Some Super Smash Brothers.
yeah, and that also comes back in this book, which we'll get to that, I think, in a
Yeah.
few minutes. But yeah, just setting up all of that stuff in the first book, having the big Pokemon stuff in the second book, and then
Mm-hmm.
the third book I had always wanted. The original working title for it was Robots in the Skies, as
Mm.
a pun, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted this to just be a conglomeration of like every cool robot, mech, what have you, in a lot of different media, in films, in TV shows, and video games. I wanted them all to get mashed together and have fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, I am ready to get into it.
All right, so I'm going to be reading from the very opening setup. This is then it requires little introduction because thank God it's at the beginning. Um, but if you again, I guess there may be spoilers if you haven't read the
There,
other two books, so just
yep.
be
Listeners,
warned.
if you didn't catch the spoiler warning that I will have put in at the very beginning of the show, now is your last chance.
Dun dun dun.
Skip over the reading and just listen to us chat about other things afterwards.
Yeah. So again, I am starting at the beginning. So chapter 1, and wait, is cursing allowed? I forgot. Is this an all ages thing? Because I definitely there's a lot of cursing.
No. Do the swears.
Okay. Had that moment of like, oh, I have to. How do I radio edit? Okay. So chapter 1 is called "No Shit, There I Was."
We love to hear it.
Captain Eva Inocente stifled a yawn as the doors at the far end of the green room slid open, allowing the screaming, whistling, and feet pounding of thousands of audience members to wash over her like a coronal mass ejection. Other competitors lined up in front of her, fidgeting with nervous excitement or stoically awaiting further orders from the production assistants, who communicated via silent comlink messages. Indistinct blue, pink, and yellow lights slowly illuminated a massive arena with platforms floating in midair above an enormous stage. Exuberant music rose in volume, the rhythmic thump of bass vibrating in Ava's chest. An announcer's voice emanated from the wristband an employee had strapped onto Ava earlier. "Welcome, persons of all persuasions, to the Crash Sisters Grand Melee!" the voice said, dragging out the final syllable. The crowd's roar increased in intensity. Record scratch, freeze frame, Ava thought. Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I ended up in this situation. "I'm really sorry, Captain," Leroy said. He tugged on his neat orange beard, an old nervous habit, stranger now that his facial hair was neatly trimmed rather than scraggly and unkempt. "No te preocupes," Ava said, propping her face up with one hand as she leaned on the table in the mess. A half-finished cafecito sat in front of her, doing little to sweeten her bitter mood. She was worried. Most of the sizable paycheck she'd just collected from the Forge, with a hefty bonus for the whole destroying a huge enemy ship and possibly saving the universe thing, was supposed to go toward ship repairs, supplies, and upgrades, not this impromptu vacation. But this was Brodivis, the planet of 1,000,000 microclimates, home to about that many overpriced tourist traps scattered around the various landscapes. It was also a prime location for Memvid production facilities, including Crash Sisters, the competitive combat reality show in which Leroy starred. The docking fees alone were more expensive than most hotels in any other part of the universe. "I was so sure I'd be able to swing something, but all the hotels are packed." Leroy's hollow crackled a bit from lag as the heavy traffic on the local quantum net relays reinforced what he'd just said. "It's not your fault," Ava said. "I should have waited to come until you confirmed." Everyone had been so excited and desperate to leave the Forge base after weeks of sporadic repairs. It was hard to get ship parts when your secret space station was days away from the nearest gate. And between the Forge people treating them like pets who did an impressive trick, and the fridge refugees from the battle being salty about losing and trying to take advantage to lurk and spy, the place was a reactor core leaking radiation, waiting to explode. An orange-striped cat wandered in, tail primly raised and slightly curved at the end. Same color as Leroy's hair, more or less. It was pursued a few moments later by a black and white spotted cat. "I couldn't even get your docking fees waived. There are so many people here for the Grand Melee. I even tried to ask some other people for help, but it's a total mess." Leroy lifted his chin in greeting at someone off-screen, probably his girlfriend, Momoko, who also starred in the show. "Hold on a sec, I'll be right back." The hollow flickered and switched to a still of Leroy's face, frozen in a dramatic scowl more reminiscent of his villainous Crash Sisters persona, the King. Leroy had sworn that with his relative fame and connections he'd be able to get them a swank room, free parking, even some meal coupons for the fancy replicators, the kind that could make complex meals instead of patties and cubes and liquids that tasted almost like they saw flavor once across a crowded room. Instead, La Sirena Negra was crammed into the spaceship equivalent of a sleeping pod, and her crew was getting increasingly angsty. They'd been promised beaches, window shopping, fancy shore excursions, and maybe even a foot massage or two. But they couldn't even get a reservation at the cheapest sidewalk food vendor stall. The last place Ava had tried to order takeout from wasn't taking requests for the next 20 cycles. The black and white cat sidled up to the orange one, rubbing its head under the other's chin. Apparently, the orange one didn't appreciate this because it hissed and sent out a psychic wave of irritation that made Ava scowl. They weren't the only ones fighting on the ship right now. Her sister Mari had tagged along after her superiors at the forge had gently but firmly encouraged her to recuperate from her injuries somewhere besides their damaged base. Agent Elis wanted to recruit Ava's crew to work for the forge, an offer Ava hadn't rejected yet, so this might be a plot to convince them it would be a good idea. If so, Mari had been the wrongest possible woman for the job. Still, Ava had thought this might be a good opportunity to reconnect, heal their relationship along with their physical injuries. Que bobería. Min and Sue were surviving because they had each other, but Pink was ready to surgically extract the stick from Mari's ass and beat her to death with it. The only thing keeping the good doctor from going bad was the promise of that foot massage at the end of the long flight. This might finally break her. As if on cue, Mari hobbled in and went straight for the cafetera. Her broken leg was on the mend, but still encased in a latticed cast, and she leaned on Ava's cane, affectionately called Fuacata. She'd pulled her brown hair back into a neat ponytail, and she scowled when she noticed Ava had left the coffee grounds in the filter basket. Cue the nagging, Ava thought. 3, 2... You know you should empty this out when it's still hot, Mari said. I didn't want to burn my fingers, Ava replied. You can use a towel, Mari said. Ava smiled humorlessly, her facial scar pulling at the skin around it. Or I could wait for it to cool down first. It gets all sludgy if you wait, Mari insisted. It's disgusting. Ava slurped her own coffee and stared at Leroy's frozen face while Mari made frustrated noises. She'd have to deliver the bad news to her crew, which sucked. They deserved a real break. They'd been dragged through a huge pile of mierda, and the stink hadn't washed off yet. Now they were out a bunch of credits, refueling would cost an arm and a half-dozen tentacles, and she'd maybe have to encourage her sister to catch a ride with someone else or face Pink's wrath. Healing was a nice dream, but Pink was reality, and much more important. I wish Vakar were here, Ava thought miserably, then quickly pushed that thought away, like a baby shunning peas. We should have gone to Neos, Ava muttered. It's a hot mess, but at least it's cheap and quiet. Pink had vetoed that option last time Ava had brought it up, though, which, fair, because Pink would be the one working to pay for their stay. My agent did have a suggestion, Leroy said. Dímelo, Ava said. You could enter the Grand Melee if you wanted to. Ava's eyebrows climbed her forehead. I could do what now? The Grand Qué? Mari paused in her coffee preparations, now actively eavesdropping. The Grand Melee, Leroy continued. It's a big free-for-all fight, you know? Dump a ton of people in a room, there can be only one. One of the contestants got a nasty concussion trying to do the latest Q-Nut dare, so a slot opened up. What's the dare? Mari asked. Leroy gave a surprisingly evil laugh. Okay, so first you need 20 cans of coconut cream and a box of sparklers. Shouldn't that slot go to someone on a waiting list or something? Ava interrupted. How do you even qualify for this? Oh, it's all good. You just have to beat a challenge room. You already did that at Evercon, remember? He grinned clearly into the idea. My agent said all I have to do is get you bumped to the top of the list and you're in. Ava took another sip of coffee. So I kick ass, ignore names, and I get what, a prize? If you win, you get a trophy, Leroy exclaimed. A trophy? Ava blinked. How would that solve their problems? What would she even do with a trophy? Cap! Min yelled over the speakers. The pilot had been eavesdropping as well, apparently. You have to do this. The Grand Melee trophy is a super big deal. I need that trophy. I need it more than I need to live. Ava hid her snort laugh behind another sip of coffee. Min had always loved Crash Sisters as much as Leroy. Of course she would want this to happen. That didn't make it a good idea. Do I have to fight you? Ava asked. Leroy shook his head. It's just noobs like you, none of us from the roster. It doesn't mean it'll be easy, but you're tough. Min giggled. You called her a noob. I'm extremely insulted, Ava deadpanned, rolling her eyes. Are medical costs covered if I'm injured? Not exactly, Leroy said. That sounds like a no, Pink said, sauntering into the mess. Her black hair was longer than it had been for a while, arranged in tiny braids thanks to the combined efforts of Min and Sue over their long forge stay. She hadn't dressed for work yet, still wearing her cozy pajamas and the slippers Ava had bought for her last birthday. "Y'all think cats grow on trees?" she continued. She glared at Mari, then pointedly ignored her, sliding into the seat next to Ava. Sue ran in from the direction of the cargo bay, slightly out of breath. Her face and jumpsuit were streaked with grease from whatever she'd been working on, safety goggles perched on top of her head. One of her tiny robots peeked out from inside a pocket in her pants and made a squealing sound that startled the two cats, who had retreated to opposite corners of the room. They both chased each other out of the room in a burst of indignation. Hi?" Sue said. "Min told me to come, you know." "Make sure Cap says she'll get the trophy!" Min exclaimed through the speakers. Someone said something behind Leroy, and he added, "It's not only a trophy, you also get a 7-cycle stay in a luxury resort." "Now that," said Pink, "is what I'm talking about. Foot massages?" "It's all inclusive," Leroy said. "Full resort privileges, including the spa. Free food, free booze, and all the memvids you can physically tolerate." Ava looked around the room at her assembled crewmates, all of them staring at her like cats waiting to be fed. Mala sauntered in to join them, her tail swishing in amusement at the tension in the air, thicker than the scent of Mari's fresh coffee percolating. "Meow," said Mala, slowly blinking her hazel eyes. "No empieces," Ava muttered. Leroy's cocky grin returned. "So, what do you say?" Ava heaved a sigh. "Me cago en 10," she said.
Oh, I'm so excited to have this book. I I love an ensemble cast in general, and like, I love a good, starship crew. And so many of my former favorite ensemble cast starship crew media franchises have turned out to be run by total shitbags. So like,
Big mood!
but this isn't.
Well, thank you. I certainly hope not. I do try. And I mean, I know that it is a constant process, right? Like, we all make mistakes, and some
Mm-hmm.
people don't care that they make mistakes, and some people listen and do better. And thankfully, I have not been told I've made mistakes yet, which is not to say that I haven't, but
Mm-hmm.
I hope that if I had, I would do better. That's it, I guess. That's the tweet.
Yeah, we've got enough paladin friends that I don't think we could survive not doing that.
Yeah, no. And again, being good and doing good is my power fantasy. And so like the notion that I have harmed someone is unpleasant to me, and I would not want to do that. And
Mm-hmm.
so yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I also love the fact that in our like circle of writers, we have so many people putting out such a diverse set of awesome spaceship books. We've got you with these three. We've got John Appel's Assassin's Orbit. We've got Karen Osborne's Memory War. Like,
Mhm.
just so many good spaceship books.
Oh yeah, and I mean Megan O'Keefe is also putting out great stuff and has a new
Yes.
series that I believe has just sold. That's going to be really exciting. So,
Mm-hmm. KB
yeah.
Wagers is
Oh
just
yeah.
always putting out amazing spaceship books.
Let me tell you, I loved the first NeoG book because it also had an amazing crew and
Mm-hmm.
like the way that they kind of cohered was awesome, and there is an in joke in that pays off so perfectly that when it happened, I had to stop and stand up and walk around the room and then sit back down and read it again. It was just that good. It was delightful. Mike Underwood also has Annihilation Aria, which is super great.
Yes.
I mean, there are just I feel like we are in a platinum age of space opera right now, not even
Mm-hmm.
just sci-fi, but space opera specifically, and it is a delight to see all of the new stuff that's coming out. I actually have an inexhaustive list of space opera that has come out recently because I like to try to keep track of what other folks are up to, what they're doing. I love
Mm-hmm.
to be able to recommend other books. So if someone likes my book, I can be like, well, try this one, try this one, try this one. Or even if they don't like my book because they think, oh, this is too video gamey, this is too, much humor, this isn't
Mm-hmm.
hard sci-fi enough, then I can be like, oh, you might want to try these other books instead then. And so I love being able to do that. I love being able to slide people sideways. I love to either be the gateway drug or to be able to be like, here is another thing that maybe will be your gateway drug into this beautiful
Mm-hmm.
age in which we find ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. I like certainly we had a lot of good spaceship books before them, but I feel like when we got and not to say that these are specifically space operas, but like the whole Imperial Radch trilogy and then the Machineries of Empire coming out
Mm-hmm.
right on its tail was like, you know, if if that didn't usher in a golden age of books with spaceships on the cover or with space on the cover in general, I don't know what did. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I can rattle off names till the cows come home at this point because there is so much, and that's wonderful. And on top of that, we are also getting, new expanded universe Star Wars content that is
mm-hmm,
being written by a much broader group of writers who are bringing really fresh ideas and interesting voices into all of this. And I think that's
mm-hmm,
awesome too. Just seeing people like DJ Older and Mike Chen and Rebecca Roanhorse putting out all of these different Star Wars books, like it's so cool to have something that was a part of my writer DNA growing up and
mm-hmm,
see where it is being taken by all of these people who have different voices than, the same old that were writing it
mm-hmm.
initially.
And also in the comics side, Alyssa Wong's
Oh yeah.
Dr. Afra.
Right? It is there's just
So
so we are spoiled for choice and it's wonderful. It's wonderful.
it's amazing. So because this is Tales from the Trunk, uh, I have to ask, and I already know the answer because we talked about it off air, but is there anything that was in this book as it was first written that just ultimately didn't make it into the final draft?
Yeah. So this book, no. This one was fairly tightly outlined. I am an outliner. I am a plotter, not a pantser. I am
Mm-hmm.
an architect, not a gardener. And that is not to say that there is no discovery for me in the process of writing the thing, because even if you have a really solid, airtight outline, that doesn't mean that you aren't going to find places that you can improve as you're writing it. That doesn't mean you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to discover things as you go that will enrich the story if you make certain changes. But that said, for this book, I had a very firm outline that I was working from. But
Mm-hmm.
what I did have to do is I had to come up with a different opening at one
Mm-hmm.
point, and what I realized was I could steal a scene I had cut from Chilling Effect and lead with that.
We
And
love to see it.
that is the entire Crash Sisters Grand Melee opening is that basically. It had originally been in Chilling Effect,
Mm-hmm.
but what happened was in the back half of Chilling Effect, Ava is trying to get her crew back together pretty much. And so this entire melee fight in the first book was her trying to get to Leroy because she could not basically get an audience with him. He was
Mm-hmm.
sequestered in the way of reality TV shows like Big Brother and stuff where no outside people can talk to them. And so she basically talked her way into being in the Grand Melee just to be able to chat with him briefly,
Mm-hmm.
and it didn't work out. So that was cut from the first book. It was decided that it didn't really fit. It was too long of a kind of side quest element, and
Yeah.
it slowed things down too much. But it was a perfect opening to this book. I'm a huge fan of the cold open, where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
here is an ostensibly entirely unrelated thing that is going to happen that will somehow lead into the actual main events of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I learned it from TV writing, and there are a lot of movies that also do that sort of thing. Thinking of like Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. Just that's the first one that came to mind. That's a lot of places, movies
Yeah.
rather, do it. But it is a thing that I do love as a technique, and so I deploy it frequently.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that it is ideal or the best or the only way to do things, but it is what I love, and that is and it worked perfectly here because it was something that was set up at the end of the previous book that they wanted to take a vacation, and this really, in theory, could have been a great vacation for them
Hmm.
until it wasn't. And then having it be interrupted by a cataclysmic event made perfect sense to me. Then instead of just having the event happen, it was like, she's in the middle of something else. And then, as usual,
Hmm.
her life is interrupted by drama.
Yeah. I was also thinking just like it's when you're finishing a trilogy, you have to have a lot more like you have to have a lot more outline stuff in place, even if you are a total pantser. And not to say that you can't pants your way out of a trilogy, but like,
Yeah, at a minimum, you have to kind of keep a lot of things in your head
mm-hmm,
that you maybe don't have in the first book. There's more freedom in the first book to play, make stuff up, introduce things, and find the core of your characters, find their voices. By the third book, you have all of that set up. You know who your characters are, you know what their backgrounds are, you know what they sound like. And so, in some ways, it makes them easier to write.
mm-hmm,
Being able to just slip straight into these people that I've been with for two other books was very easy. I can hear them in my head now. And so, it's almost just a process of transcribing the kinds of stuff that they would say.
mm-hmm.
It's not as simple as that. I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, my character took over and was I was channeling them. Not quite that, but
Mm-hmm.
you get a feel for, again, the rhythms of their speech, the kinds of things that they're worried about, the kinds of stuff that
Yeah.
they're going to say. So it
It's
becomes
like
just
writing
easier.
fan fiction, only it's
Yeah.
your OCs.
Exactly, exactly. But even like writing fan fiction, sometimes you still then have to look stuff up where you're like, wait, when did I establish this? Did I not establish this? Let me go back and look it
Mm-hmm.
up. And I do have a wiki for these books, which I've modified the way that I do my wikis sort of.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a literal wiki
Nice.
for these. I've switched to just using Google Docs with styles so that I can easily switch between the headers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But so I would have to go back and be like, all right, what does this smell mean? What when Vakar smells
Uh,
like this, what is the smell? You know, stuff like that. Um, just
you
going
can't
back.
just start it with some tags that say not canon compliant.
Yeah, no, that is not. When you're doing an actual published book, sadly, that is not allowed. And I can only imagine that some people still will go to the non-canon compliant AO3 stories and be like, "This isn't canon." It's like, yeah, I tagged it, jerk. Yeah, I said it wasn't. I just am doing my own thing,
Just
man.
exclude the tag if you don't like that.
Exactly. Leave me alone. There's like 100 other stories to read, unless it's a rare pair, I guess. But you know, that's a whole other story.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
As somebody who not exclusively, but almost exclusively writes rare pairs.
so you understand where it's like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry that I'm not giving you the thing that you want from this rare pair. It's my story, and so sorry that there aren't a lot of other options.
Also,
Um,
nobody's looking for the rare pairs I'm writing anyway, because it's like two NPCs that show up in one episode of an actual play podcast that came out 4 years ago.
But those are the best, right? Those side characters that live with you and kind of have that rent-free space in your head, and you have to just
Mm-hmm.
do something with them. I think that's one of the wonderful things about fan fiction is that you find these kinds of, NPCs, so to speak, these secondary characters who have not been fleshed out
Mm-hmm.
sufficiently, but who seem to hint at like a richer backstory, and especially in the ways that they relate to each other. And
Mm-hmm.
then just finding kind of interstitial moments to explore, like, what happened at this point where there was a time jump, what happened when they changed from this location to this location, what happened in this place where they just kind of expositioned and elided whatever might have occurred there. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there is just so much fertile ground for fanfic in all these places. So
Also, Austin just threw in a extremely competent woman and her terrible cyber dog, and then did nothing with her after that. And I was like, this demands a 5+1 fic.
Yeah, and 5+1 is one of the like I have told other friends how much I love 5+1 as a format. It is one of the kind of platonic ideals of a story form, in my opinion. It
Mm-hmm.
works so well to structure just kind of a tight series of scenes that flow together and that have a very clear arc to them. And
Mm-hmm.
chef kiss. And it reminds me also of some improv structures. So when you're doing improv theater, which is not a thing I do, but my husband does, just there are set structures like a herald where you kind of weave
Mm-hmm.
things in and out. Characters come, characters go. You're mixing and matching who's in the scene in a very specific kind of way, and it is building towards a sort of set kind of finale structurally. And I love to think about those kinds of interplays between media. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how can improv forms inform story forms? How can story forms inform improv? How can things that you learn from video games inform your writing? How can things you learn from TV and movies inform your writing? And so I think that pulling from all of those different areas can be really beneficial. It can teach you a lot.
For sure. So now that we've talked around the things that didn't get trunked because there was nothing to trunk, and in fact we pulled something out of the trunk
Yes.
and tacked it on the beginning, which, just absolute chef kiss mood. Do you have a favorite part without spoiling too much more, I'll say, I guess, that you did get to keep in this book?
I do, and it's hard to talk about because it is such a spoiler, but it is such to me a delightful spoiler. Um, and
Listeners, you've been warned.
I know, and it's like I want everyone to be surprised by this, but also I love it so much. Um, there is a character from the first book that is just the most hateful piece of crap, and his
Oh
name
my
is
god.
Miles Irk. And he began as a variation on Conrad Werner, who is a character in Mass Effect, who is just
Mm-hmm.
he's a fan of Shepard, and he's just an utter dip. Like, he cannot get his act together. His arc throughout the trilogy through the game trilogy is somewhat painful and sad. And and yet it can pay off really well at the end. But I didn't
Mm-hmm.
want Miles Irk to have a redemption arc the way that
No, because
Conrad
fuck
Werner
that
does.
guy.
No, he sucks. He sucks so much. And originally, I'm not going to say who he was based off of, but we will say that he is at a minimum based off of a real life kind of person that you hate because he
Mm-hmm.
sucks. He is a jerk. He is misogynistic. He is self absorbed. He has an incredibly inflated view of his own worth. And just, if any minimal value that he might have as a person, as a scientist, as whatever, it doesn't matter because he sucks. And I feel like in life, there are so many times where you'll have, say, a director who people are like, but he's
Mm-hmm.
brilliant. We need to keep letting him direct, even though he has molested a bunch of people or he threw a cup of coffee at one of the actors or whatever. It's like, no, you don't. You don't have to keep giving him work. It doesn't matter how there is someone else out there who can do the thing
Mm-hmm.
this person is doing. You do not need to keep them. You can let them go. I promise you, 10 people are standing by to take their place. Seriously. And it's almost always a dude, let's be real. But
Yeah.
that said, I wanted to write a character that kind of manifested all of that anger that I have towards that sort of person, where it's like, again, any skills you may have, any value you may have, somebody else probably has it and has it better. Um, and so I bring him back, and I bring him back in one particular place, and it's a kind of a not amazing comeback for him. But then at the end, I did not have like a good closure to him. I
Mm-hmm.
thought that scene was enough, and my editor was like, no, we need something else here. And I was like, you know what? You're absolutely right. And so Miles Irk has just the most embarrassing ending of
An
any character.
ignominious send off for an absolute jerk.
Extremely, extremely. And like, when my editor said that he needed more and that something needed to happen, I was like, wait a minute, I know exactly where to stick this dude. Because, and this is something that when you're writing, it can be a good thing to look for. You try to find moments where instead of having like new secondary characters that you've thrown in just for a specific scene, is there
Mm-hmm.
someone you can bring back and put in that scene instead and kind of just
Mm-hmm.
tighten things up? So that you don't have too many additional characters, especially ones that are not doing anything particularly useful or necessary, right? You want all
Mm-hmm.
things to be for a purpose. You want things to be intentional. And I realized that I had in that scene just created two random like mercenary characters who were doing a particular thing that needed to be done. And I was like, wait a minute. Of course, Miles Erk would be the person doing this. Obviously, it made perfect
Mm-hmm.
sense, and it allowed me to just give him the most, again, like you said, ignominious send off that I could have given him. And it's another thing that I didn't want for him is to have any kind of like a big send off, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want him to do anything that was noteworthy. I didn't want him to, make a spectacle of himself. I wanted him to just go like a fart in the
Yeah.
night in the wind, but still one that you knew was there. And that is what happened. And I cannot wait for people to get to that moment. It may not matter to anybody else but me, but I deeply loved doing what
I
I did
love
to
this
him.
for you.
It was a delight.
That sounds amazing. Um, so a couple of quick questions before we go. One, who's your main in Smash?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so when it comes to fighting games, I suck at them. Just straight up. Suck at fighting games. Never have
Fair.
been good at them. Um, I think the best fighting game I ever was good at was Tekken 2 because I played it relentlessly. Um, like,
I
but
mean, that was the time for it.
yeah. Um, but and of course Marvel vs. Capcom, which
Mm-hmm.
we had a Marvel vs. Capcom machine in the theater where I worked, and everybody played it nonstop until to the point that the manager had to get it removed because it was a problem. The staff were shirking their duties. Anyway, um, I play Jigglypuff because it's just if you get beaten by Jigglypuff, that just is
Yeah.
embarrassing. It's deeply embarrassing, and so I usually main Jigglypuff.
I one time at the school I used to work at, some of the teens brought in like their older brother's GameCube and hooked it up to a projector and had Smash Melee on it. And I was like, okay, you think you're good. I'm good. Like, you might have all this stuff. I'm still going to beast you with Jigglypuff because I've been playing this game on and off since I was your age.
And it's like there is just something like if you lose with Jigglypuff, everyone was expecting it because it's
Mm-hmm.
Jigglypuff. But if you win with Jigglypuff, it's embarrassing. And like Jigglypuff literally has a move where she puts herself to sleep. Like, what are you doing,
Yeah,
Jigglypuff? Like, why would you even have that move? It makes no sense. So yeah, I love Jigglypuff. But aside from Jigglypuff, it's like, yeah, I mean, I love Link. I love Zelda slash Sheik.
mm-hmm.
Samus, of course, is
Of
amazing.
course. Who
But
doesn't?
yeah, but yeah, and like in newer Smash, my kids play it a lot, and they almost always play Kirby because they love Kirby. They just deeply love Kirby, and Kirby is great and versatile in the same way that like Shang Tsung was versatile because if you're Kirby, you're anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's something about that is attractive. I will also, in the same vein, I will say my Marvel vs. Capcom team, and again, it's Marvel vs. Capcom 2, New Age of Heroes. It was always Trombone, Cerbot, and Roll.
Oh,
Because,
nice.
but for the same reason. Because if you get lunch rushed so many times
Mm-hmm.
and you can double it with Trombone and Cerbot, you can just do it twice. You can change it. It's embarrassing. You have just been wrecked by a
Yeah,
thousand tiny robots. It's a lot.
it's a lot.
Yeah, and then Roll because I like to play all lady teams. I don't know. It's just my thing.
That's fair.
I enjoy
That's
doing
fair.
it. And she can turn into a giant robot, and that's pretty cool too.
That's also, yeah. Uh, I was never any good at that. I would usually have Jill on my team just
Oh,
because Jill.
yeah, yeah.
Like, I could very rarely pull off the zombie dogs, but if I did.
Yeah, yeah, then it's exciting. And that's like to me that's some of the fun of fighting games is if you can pull a thing off, then it is a
Hmm.
delight. And Marvel vs. Capcom especially being able to like chain assists is really cool. Like pulling people in and out. If
Yeah.
if you hit someone with like all three of your team members, big moves, it's just the feeling, the rush, the euphoria. It is
It's
a lot.
there's a reason that people still play fighting games and
Absolutely.
that people still play like Marvel vs. Capcom 2.
Yes, yes. My husband has like a big, arcade joystick controller thing that I don't even know if it works anymore. He hasn't played it in a long time, but yeah, my kids have been playing Smash. I can't remember which version they're playing. It's not Melee. I think it's Brawl. Um, it's the Wii U one.
Hmm.
I don't remember.
Uh, I think that one was just Smash Brothers U.
Yeah, maybe. I
Or
know there are
Smash
so
Brothers
many.
Wii U because it was like
Yeah,
the Wii U and the DS.
there are so many of them at
I
this
don't know.
point.
I skipped that generation.
Yeah, yeah. It's got I think it's got Marth in it, so whichever one that is. Again,
That's I think everything since Melee.
yeah, has had him. Okay. Um
Yeah.
but yeah, this I think it's the one Mr. Game and Watch. No, did the first one have Mr. Game and Watch? No, I'm like I don't time
Melee
is a flat circle. Everything just blurs
time
together.
is fake, but Melee introduced Game and Watch.
Nice, yeah. And so yeah, it's fun to watch at this point. I do not play it very much anymore because
Hmm.
if I'm playing anything like the stuff that I've been playing lately, obviously I'm going through. I finished the Mass Effect playthrough, so I'm starting Andromeda next. I've also been playing Horizon Zero Dawn, which is awesome. And yeah, no, and like again, talk about a masterclass in like reveals that the
Hmm.
way that the reveals are paced in that game, amazing. Um, and just like the world building and the way that you get information about the history, super love it. Um, Hades,
Hades. Yes.
so good, so good, deeply
So good.
love.
So this segues very nicely. Are there other things that you have that you would like to promote? Maybe Twitch channel, maybe like an actual play series. Just
Just
throwing some
throwing that out
ideas out
there
there.
randomly. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Valerie Valdes, and that is with an S if you are listening to this and not looking at links. And I also stream on Twitch as the kids are asleep, which is when I stream. Although frequently they are
They
not
are not.
asleep at the
Yeah.
time that I start streaming, which is always like, "Grr, con." Um, but it basically 9 o'clock Eastern, Monday through Thursday is when streaming happens. And my husband actually does the Thursday stream. He's doing Mass Effect from the beginning. He has never
Woo.
played it before. I know. How do I live with him? But how does he live with me, frankly, is the real question. But he also then streams music on Saturdays. And so, as I said, the games I'm streaming right now, Hades, Mass Effect Andromeda, I'm starting, Horizon Zero Dawn's on Wednesday, but I'm almost done with that. So I think I'm going to be switching to Guardians of the Galaxy, which I've heard really good
Oh,
things
nice.
about. Yeah. And I also am part of an actual play called Girl by Moonlight Fractal Spire. Girl by Moonlight is a system whose creator I cannot remember the name of to my embarrassment, but it is a spin-off of the Blades in the Dark system,
Hmm.
uh, and it is a magical girl game, basically.
Nice.
And so there are a few different sort of play sets that you can use in that. And the one that we're using most frequently, like the media comparisons that are used for it are like Persona and Lane, Serial Experiments Lane.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is a very like anti-capitalist in a capitalist hellscape kind of game where some of the characters turn into, magical girl alter ego
We
type
love it.
stuff. Yeah. And so we are going to be playing our next game this Sunday, which for listeners is not this Sunday because
Yeah.
unfortunately,
It's in the
um,
past
it is
now.
in the past when you are listening to this. But we do play once a month. And so if you head to the Armin Elleron Twitch channel, you can check that out. There are plays on YouTube. The recordings are available. And if you follow me on Twitter, then I usually announce it when it's going to be happening so that you can come and join us and enjoy our game. It's GM'd by Brandon O'Brien, who is an amazing writer and poet.
We
And
love it.
yep, our other players it's me, Mike Underwood, Yori Kusano, and Yoi Gawain Lin. And we also had played previously a Blades in the Dark game That was deeply, deeply fun. And if you ever want to listen to that actual play, it's complete now. We also play occasional one-offs. We played one of Shiver, which is a cool
Oh,
horror game.
nice.
Yeah, yeah, that one we called it was Death of the Author was that one, in which we all played alter egos of ourselves. We were actually, we were playing different characters that were not us, but all of them authors in some way. And we also just played a one-page RPG called Stone the Crows, I believe.
Ooh,
Yeah, and that was we were all Corvids, and we were attempting to
nice.
steal the crown jewels from the Tower of London. And that was a very fun game as
I
well.
love a one-page RPG.
Oh yeah, they're just delightful, and it's really easy to grasp the mechanics and just throw a game together and have a good time. So,
Yeah. I will also say I love Blades in the Dark and Blades in the Dark hacks.
oh yeah.
Friends at the Table Partisan, which I just finished listening to fairly recently, is run off of Beam Saber, which is a giant robot hack of Blades in the Dark.
Yeah, there are so many good ones out at this point, and I
So many
mean,
good
there
ones.
there are there are kind of like I think Scum and Villainy is also a Blades in the Dark hack, except I think it actually may have been before Blades in the Dark, because I think
Who knows?
yeah, it's the like Forged by Fate system, I think, or something like that. But yeah, those it the use of clocks alone is an amazing mechanic, and I actually went on a long Twitter rant at one point about how clocks are a really great way to also outline slash plot a novel, or even a story, because of the fact that it gives you kind of a fixed method of advancing action and
Mm-hmm.
advancing consequences and keeping track of what your antagonistic elements are doing potentially. It's just it's a really useful mechanic, not just for a TTRPG, but you can even play with it as a writer. It increases suspense and drama and immediacy, and it's just
Yeah.
love it,
It's a
love clocks.
great it's a great mechanic, and I deeply love clocks in any system, whether it supports it or whether you're just hacking it in at the table.
Oh yeah, clocks all the way down.
Clocks all the way down. Uh, Finally, is there any piece of media that you have been listening to, playing, watching, reading that you're super excited to pump up for our listeners?
Oh gosh. My reading has really fallen off since pandemic times started,
Mood,
unfortunately.
mood, mood.
Yeah, I wish that I had something that I could be like, "Oh yes, totally go read this. This is amazing." Aside from like Annihilation Area by Mike Underwood, which I will always it just pairs so well with my books that if you like mine, you'll like his. It's kind of like it like Farscape meets, I don't know, it's like a paladin bard. I don't know. She's amazing.
Yeah,
Anyway, I
it's
love
real
the
good.
character in the book. Yeah. So definitely would offer that up as an option. Um, I just started watching Ms. Marvel last night, and I love it deeply already. I am excited
Nice.
to see the rest of it. Our Flag Means Death is a show that I cannot believe how amazingly it balances humor and seriousness. It just absolutely goes between drama and tragedy so fluidly, and I
It's
am
incredible.
deeply envious, and I wish I could manage that. It is something I try. I also, in my writing, I am trying to create something of a safe space. Bad things happen to the characters, but
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't know if this is a spoiler, but my attitude is they're all going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
For particular definitions of okay, but I I don't like to write stories where people die randomly. I don't I feel like character death has to be really earned, and so, you know, I don't like to go there. But
Yeah.
Our Flag Means Death has just it is an amazing balance, and you can almost always see kind of like the dark side of whatever is happening, even as it is very funny,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes it sometimes harder for me to watch because of, our world being on fire constantly all the time. But at the same time, I admire it so much. The writing is so good, and it makes me laugh out loud just multiple times in every episode. Sometimes it's
Which is so
embarrassment stuff.
vital right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I have not finished watching it. I have 3 episodes to go, and I keep being like, I don't know. I'm so it's like you don't want to eat the last piece of cake or
Mm-hmm.
something, and then you save it and then it expires. But I will be
They
watching
did
it soon.
renew it for Pride.
I know. I'm so excited. I can't wait to see where it goes next. And what else? We watched Moon Knight, which
Oh, yeah.
it had some definitely good stuff. Love Oscar Isaac. What else have we watched? Ooh, we just well, I won't talk about that one because we didn't like it that much. It's like, wait a minute, I don't want to bring us down. What else can I? I mean, again, I'm playing Hades, which is amazing, but everybody already knew that because it came out like a million years ago. I'm late to the party as always, and
But you're really good at it.
oh, it's funny. Like it is definitely getting harder because my husband and I are going back and forth with the control. I'm not getting
Mm-hmm.
like as much practice as he is, I think, and so my skills are now starting to lag as the game is starting to get harder. So yeah, I probably need to just go back to my own game and play it myself for a little while just to get back up on that wagon. And I'm trying to think like what else, what other stuff. I guess we played. Oh, an amazing game that we played on stream was Knights and Bikes. Super
Oh,
duper
yeah.
loved it. I am someone who is I struggle with child danger stories.
Mm-hmm.
But I felt like since this was a video game about children and danger, they would probably be okay ultimately, and so
Yeah.
that kind of helped. Um, but it is about basically a girl who lives in a trailer park with her dad, and her entire life is falling apart. Her mother has died, and then she suddenly gets a new friend, and they go around on their bikes trying to sort of solve a mystery of why there's like a horrifying fog that's turning people into terrible monsters and making inanimate
Mm-hmm.
objects attack them. So it is a super fun game, and the punk soundtrack is just a delight. Super
That's
duper love it.
awesome.
Recommend it to everybody.
Well, Val, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It has been an absolute delight to just have pure gremlin time. Listeners, a reminder again, you can find Val on Twitter at Valerie Valdes, on Twitch at The Kids Are Asleep, streaming at 9 p.m. Eastern weeknights. Highly recommend tuning into that stream when you can. Highly recommend following Val on Twitter for shitposts and great writing advice.
Yeah, and just weird stuff my children say. They're
And weird stuff your children say, which is also priceless.
they're
100% here for it.
like me, they are both deeply weird, and I do love them dearly.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be back, and I had a wonderful time.
absolutely. Listeners, stick around in 2 weeks' time when our guest will be Rem Wigmore joining us once again on the show. Tales from the Trunk is mixed and produced in beautiful Oakland, California. Our theme music is Paper Wings by Lillian Boyd. You can support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/trunkcast. All patrons of the show now get a sticker and logo button, along with show outtakes and other content that can't be found anywhere else. You can find the show on Twitter at Trunkcast, and I tweet at HBBisniaks. If you like the show, consider taking a moment to rate and review us on your preferred podcast platform. And remember, don't self-reject.